When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject: The Visitor. User: Ananti3. Posted April 2nd, 1997.
I need some serious help. I'm not really sure how else to put it. This isn't one of those half-drunk, delusional ramblings either. I'm not looking for you to pay attention to me. I'm dead serious. Please. Last night, something happened and I don't know where else to turn. I can't shake the feeling that if I don't take some kind of action, then something worse is on its way. It started a couple of years ago. My son Ethan was 8 at the time, and every so often he'd wake us up to tell us that there was a man in his window. I brushed it off like any groggy parent would. I mean, kids see shadows and hear noises they think are monsters all the time, right? And honestly, I just figured it was sort of my fault anyway, because one night, his mom and I made the mistake of letting Ethan stay up to watch an episode of The X-Files with us, and it was the one with the little blonde-haired boy who keeps writing all the ones and zeros everywhere. Ethan loved it at the time, probably because the boy kinda looked like him, but it was pretty obvious when he didn't sleep that night. We made a mistake. Yet that isn't when the nighttime stuff started to happen. He didn't start telling us about the man in the window until a few months later. Over and over again, we tried to settle him down. It's nothing, buddy, just a tree or your imagination or some shadow or something. But he never backed down. I even went outside a few times with a flashlight to try to prove that there was no one out there, but like I said, Ethan never backed down. I swear he's real, Dad, I'd say with the kind of serious confidence you don't expect from a kid. He just only comes when you're not here. I should have listened. The last few days, Ethan has been pretty sick. His fever went as high as 102, and he even puked a few times. My wife is a saint, a real trooper who has taken incredible care of our son through this, and so yesterday, when I got home from work, I told her it was my turn to jump in. She deserved a rest, and I could handle it. After a couple crackers for dinner, I gave Ethan some medicine, tucked him into bed, and climbed in with him to rub his back while he drifted off. I must have fallen asleep at some point myself, because the next thing I knew, it was a little after 2, and the room was dark except for a faint glow from his Spider-Man nightlight. That's when I saw it. At first, I wasn't sure what I was looking at. I've always been a light sleeper, and something must have stirred me awake, but I didn't hear anything. The room was still, too still. Then my eyes adjusted, and there it was, a figure standing outside Ethan's window, a silhouette against the backdrop of the night, yet it wasn't moving, just staring. My first thought was to grab something, anything. I could see Ethan's baseball bat hanging next to his desk on the other side of the room, but as soon as I started to slowly roll out of the bed, I realized this man, if you could even call him that, was not normal. He may have looked human, but there was absolutely no way he was. It was tall, impossibly tall, and thin, almost stretched out like someone had pulled it like taffy. The silhouette of his form had a sort of glow to it as well, but not like a shadow would. I squinted to see a little better, yet the longer I stared, caught in shock, the more I could see of it. For a brief moment, I prayed that my mind was playing tricks on me, that maybe I had a fever too, but as my sight adjusted even more to the dark, I was able to make out some of his facial features, and God, it was like nothing I had ever seen. An almost absurdly symmetrical oval shape with smooth black pits for eyes that seemed to pull at me like they wanted me to come closer, to press my face to the glass, and I don't even know what. All thought of grabbing that baseball bat was gone. I couldn't move. I wanted to just take Ethan and run, but my body refused to cooperate. I just sat there, still, staring back at this thing, still trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Then, a flash of soft white light overtook everything, like a gentle crash of lightning in slow motion, and in an instant, it was gone. Just like that. 1 second, it was there, and the next, the space outside the window was empty. I don't know if it walked away or if it just vanished, but I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at this empty window, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. Now I wanted to puke. Eventually, I managed to shake my boy awake. He groaned and complained, still half asleep, but I didn't care. I picked him up and brought him into my room, locking the door behind us. Obviously, I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind outside had me on edge, thinking it would come back. When the sun finally rose, I went outside to check around the yard, and the grass below Ethan's window was undisturbed. No footprints, no broken branches, nothing at all to prove what I'd seen, but I know it was real. I know it. Over breakfast, my wife asked why I decided to bring Ethan into our bed last night, and as fast as I could make something up, I just went ahead and told her, the little guy has had it rough. Maybe we should let him have his mom and dad for a few more nights. What do you think? She shrugged in agreement, not doubting me for a second, and has gone about her day, while me, I continue to freak out. I've spent all day replaying it in my mind, trying to make sense of what that was. Was it an alien? Something from another dimension? Have I watched too much X-Files now? The thing is, it's not just about last night either. It's about all those times Ethan told me about the man in the window, and I didn't believe him. All those nights I told him it was just his imagination, that he was safe. I have never felt like more of a failure as a father. What if that thing's been watching him all these years, waiting, and what does it want? I'm scared. Scared for Ethan, scared for myself, scared for whatever comes next.
Subject, the wait. User, Oregon Anon. Posted, August 12, 1994.
the weirdest thing that ever happened in my life really didn't happen to me. It happened to my son, Russell. At the time, Russell was 8 and we were living in a mobile park outside of Eugene, Oregon. My relationship with Russ's mom was always the on-again, off-again type, and like a lot of people, we thought having a kid would flip the switch permanently over to the on side. Anyone with half a brain reading this will know that didn't fix anything, and instead, we just ended up bringing an innocent kid into our messed up dynamic. Don't get me wrong, I love my son and now my grandkids, but there's still a lot of guilt there when I think about the things Russell had to see and hear growing up. So the weird thing that happened. It started in the middle of the night. Diane and I were on the outs again, and she was off doing God knows what or who, and I was at the trailer watching TV. It must have been a Friday or Saturday because back then television didn't run all night except on weekends. If I remember right, there was some old Boris Karloff crime film playing, The Monster or something like that. It was a totally normal night except for the fact I couldn't sleep. Russ was always a good sleeper, so usually once I knew he was down for the night, I got maybe an hour or two to myself before I dropped off too. Being a full-time parent and working 9 to 5 is no joke. That night, though, I was just wired, like I had a gallon of Folgers instead of my usual evening Sanka. Sometime after midnight, I started to think I was falling asleep because everything seemed dimmer. It's the best way I can describe it, like the bulb in my end table was starting to burn out, except I'd only replaced it a few days before. Heaviness set in, my limbs seeming to weigh 2 or 3 times as much as normal. This was beyond being tired, and it started to feel like the time I ate pot brownies in college. I wasn't sure what was going on, except that I wanted nothing more than to give in to it, to let go and, sleep I don't really know, but whatever it was, I was just about to close my eyes when I heard my father's voice in my ear. At that point in time, my father had been dead for 10 years, but it was unmistakably him saying just one word, Russell. That lit a fire in me, and I pushed back hard against the blackness weighing me down, my heart beating against my ribcage as I struggled to my feet. The darkness was everywhere. It dimmed the lights and gathered in the corner of the room like black mold. My legs felt like lead as I forced myself down the hallway toward Russ's room, turning on every single light as I went. Each bulb flicking to life was weaker than it should have been, but still seemed to have an effect on the darkness around me, loosening its grip. Each light seemed to take a little more of the weight off me, and by the time I gripped the doorknob of Russ's room, I felt back in full control of myself. That doorknob was like ice, but I ignored the pain in my hand and cranked open the door, light spilling in from behind me. The doorknob might have been cold, but Russ's room was hot, way hotter than the rest of the house. I could barely pay attention to that, however, as the darkness that had started to fill up the corners of the living room and hallway had completely taken over the bedroom, as if someone had blocked up every window and crack. Russ's bed was completely hidden, like he was being covered by whatever this was, and at that, the thought someone or something was hurting my son, I lost my goddamn mind. Screaming at the top of my lungs, I ran full bore into Russ's room. There was no plan, no real idea of what I was going up against or what might happen to me, just the singular thought that I had to get between this thing and my boy. What I felt next was the worst physical sensation I have ever experienced. The blackness around Russ had an actual presence, oily and prickly, as if I was moving through a huge spider's nest. I wanted to scream again, but was afraid that if I opened my mouth, whatever these things were would find their way down my throat. In the chaos of the swirling, oily mess, my thighs finally bashed against the frame of Russ's bed, pain quickly flaring as I reached down to feel his outline. The moment I touched his shoulder, I heard a rushing sound like the air being let out of a balloon and watched as the thick, seething mass of darkness receded back out the door, down the hall, and around the corner. When it was gone, the hallway lights burned as brightly as they ever did. Russ looked up at me and said, "Dad, what was that?" I didn't have an answer for him. The darkness never came back, and to this day, I don't know what it was. We've talked about it a few times over the years, but Russ doesn't remember much about that night apart from the sensation of heat and feeling as though he was being smothered. The whole thing sounds unbelievable, I know, but the thing I wrestle with most was hearing my father's voice. He and I weren't close, and he was dead 5 years before I found out about it. Was he trying to atone for some of the things he did in life? To make sure I didn't lose Russ like he'd lost me, albeit for very different reasons? I don't know, but when my time comes, you can bet I'm going to ask him.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.